Let's just begin with part one. We'll just dive straight in, and I'm saying hello to anybody who's watching online and recommend that you go to the certification page of the website and open it up to additional certification resources, which is a gold mine, a treasure trove of material, videos, webinars, study materials, past exams with solutions and everything. It is just fantastic. They have expanded it tremendously, so it's really wonderful. So the keyboard part of this test is done live and is graded live in person by 2 examiners, but it's totally anonymous. And a new change, and this didn't happen back in the day. I took the AAGO back in 2001, my senior year of college. You didn't have this, but now they give you 30 minutes in a room without a piano to look at this material. We never had that before, so they're always changing and updating this. So all of this stuff, which seems like it may be difficult at sight, it's not actually totally at sight. You have 30 minutes in which you have time to look at the, well, I guess you probably don't get the sight reading. I'm not sure about that, but prior you have 30 minutes. Questions A, 2, transposition. So in 30 minutes, you can do a lot with that transposition, whether that's analyzing or whether that's learning in your head, whatever. Figured bass, you can sort through. There's some really weird figures. You can make a note of what that is. Harmonization, etc. So I think it's quite reasonable.
Can you write notes to yourself?
I'd have to consult the manual of procedure to be absolutely sure. But I think if they're giving you 30 minutes in a room without a piano, I mean, I would see why you couldn't make a note, but I do remember in the past something. But they've tried to really modernize, and the exams are not. They're not making an attempt to trick anybody or to have trick questions. I mean, they do want people to pass the test. This may be the great maestro himself, Dr. Mark Dwyer. It is wonderful. Welcome. We just began this second. So I'll just demonstrate a few things, and I want to start with harmonization so that you see what you're looking at here. In the 2025 exam, it's A5, harmonization, and as you can see, it's part soprano melody and part bass line, and it says here, harmonize this melody and bass in 4 parts in continuous fashion using pedal if desired. I think most of us do this kind of thing all the time. Maybe harmonizing from the bass up seems a little weird at first, but it's in a way it's just like figured bass. And I have not looked at this exam, and you don't have to use pedal, but I like to use pedal. And let's see, what is there something here? What's on these pistons here? These are. Perfect. Okay, so here's our melody. So in your 30 minutes, you just, you'd look through this and get an idea. It's very diatonic. So it's a very simple cadence. Quarter note about the tempo of a hymn, and there's no need to go unusually fast, and that's all you have to do is give. So let's see what I can do with it here. So in 4 parts. Perfect, but that's kind of that's all you really have to do. And I remember with strategy and these things, each section of the test is considered passing with 50%. Now you have to get a 70 overall to pass the test. But that means that if there's one area that you feel weak in, and let's take the transposition, for example, which always makes people nervous. You have you have two transpositions, one up and one down. So even if you got one right and totally failed the other one, you still would have 50%. You know what I mean? So when you think about strategy in terms of passing. So what I did there, I don't think maybe it was perfect, but it was perfectly acceptable. Even if I got an 8 out of 10, that's still, so that gives me a leg up. If I only get 50 on something else, then my average is already tipped in a positive direction. So that's kind of the. Does anybody have any questions about A5? It's really as simple as that. Just soprano melody, make it sort of like a hymn, you know. And you know, you can have passing tones. I had a couple of passing tones. You know, you could. Does that seem doable?
So you're grading this the way our freshman theory teacher would grade it?
Well, the examiners have this in front of them, and they're sitting there listening. And so, I mean, what is the examiner listening for in something like this? I mean, first of all, you know, are they playing in the right key? Did they play the right notes that are on the page? And were there any obvious voice leading or really weird harmonic shifts that made no sense at all? Or you know, does the candidate appear to have a command of the keyboard harmony, or does it sound like they're really struggling through it and does not have, you know, it's not a difficult thing to pass, I think, you know. So this is an easy one to start with. Then there's the transposition. Let's look at transposition next. And Kathy's keeping me on time. So again, you have 30 minutes in a room at a table, not at a piano, but you can do a lot with this transposition just by analyzing it here, which I have not done. But this is what the example asks. Transpose the following passage of music using pedals if desired. It may be played once in the original key. So that's great. In addition to the 30 minutes, you could sit down and play. I tend to be stronger by ear, and so it's very helpful to have heard it. But this is so conventional, you can even hear it in your head, you know, looking at it on the page. It says, transpose down a whole step to the key of C and up a half step to E flat. Now, one common thing that I have seen happen in exams is that sometimes in the pressure situation, the candidate will accidentally not play it in the right key. So they would take points off for that, you know. So actually now they actually state it, play it in C. In previous years, they used to say transpose it up a whole step, and they wouldn't. It'd be very easy just in the moment to just start playing in the wrong key. And so that's the first thing. I think with everything on these tests is to read the directions very carefully. But let's just talk through this. For some, everybody here is so totally equipped to do these things already that if this seems too basic, you know, just stop me. But I think for when I was working on this little handout yesterday, I almost didn't realize half the time, again, about that 30 minutes in a room without a keyboard. That just changes everything because you're not doing it completely at sight. So it's very doable. But I put these directions down here just as ways to practice it depending on where you are with transposition. So first point was you won't be doing it completely at sight thanks to the 30-minute prep period. Second thing is it does need to be practiced, and so one can't go in with transposition and just expect to try your luck and see, because if you're nervous in the exam, or if the example is harder than you think, or if they give you one that's in an awkward key, you know, there's all these kind of things. So it's good to practice. So I was thinking about how to practice transposition. It's one of those skills that is, I guess everybody's brain operates differently. Some people can use different techniques. Some people are stronger with ear. Mark and I talk about this all the time. So I may be better transposing up than transposing down, or you may be better at transposing down, because we do a lot of that with just trying to match anthems with hymns and things like that. And I'm sure that we probably have two totally different approaches, but here are some ideas. You should just practice. It needs practice, but it doesn't need a lot of practice. And it's better to do a little practice every day. And when I say 5 minutes a day, that's really what I mean, just 5 minutes. And take something simple, like a half Anglican chant with the 10 chords or something, you know, or just open up the hymnal. And you can just, if you don't transpose a lot, just start on the first day, open up the hymnal, hopefully do a hymn you don't know, if that's possible. And or if you get a hymnal from a hymnal that you don't play out of, so you know, so that you have a better chance of not knowing the hymn. And just start with the soprano on the first day and spend 5 minutes and transpose the melody. and then maybe do the bass, because those are the two most important parts. And again, if you think about the strategy for the test, you have to do 2 transpositions, so that's 50 and 50. One may be stronger than the other. The soprano and the bass are the most important parts. If you leave out a note here and there, again, you think, let's say you give a scale of 1 to 10 for each, it's 20 points. That may not be exactly how it's graded, but 10 points for the whole step up and 10 points for the whole step down, if you get most of it. So I'm just thinking about, again, strategy plays a lot into practice techniques. Practice simple Anglican chant or hymns. As you can see from the example, this is pretty much the length. It's the length of a short hymn like Stuttgart or St. Anne or something. 2 systems. This is fairly typical. And I'd say also practice mostly in standard keys. I don't, as I said before, the test is never designed to be a gotcha situation. They're not going to give you something in F sharp major and say transpose it to B flat or something. It's not. Most hymns, as we know, most hymns are in D and F and G, right? And it may not be a hymn; it may be a totally original composition, but it'll be like a hymn, and it won't be much longer than this. So that's what you would expect. Practice can also be visual, and I think that's a good idea since you have that 30 minutes. Looking at hymns or examples like this. Oh, good, thank you. And saying what is a typical harmonic shift that happens in most hymns. You have a secondary dominant, or maybe those are the kind of things to practice getting used to those. Let's see. This is something I really would say. Work on a hymn that you can do in church on Sunday. If you don't normally transpose, just start doing it. Or who was it? Who was that organist? Is it somebody in our chapter was it you? Do you always play a hymn and not in the written key on the page?
No.
That was not you? There's somebody if the hymn is in F, they play it in F sharp. This is somebody I know, because they keep that skill fresh. But I think mimicking the exam, if you have to do it in church, to say like you're going to do it in front of people, or as Mark says, in front of God and everyone, And so that mimics a little bit of that pressure situation. You have to get it right. So try doing it at church. Soprano and bass, most important. Oh, I think this is, for me, is also important. Knowing what a key feels like under your hands, depending on where the sharps and naturals are. And once you know, this example says here, play once, transpose it to the key of C. Oh, so you know what C feels like, because there's not going to be any black keys or whatever, but C just feels like C, and E flat feels like E flat. So when you sit down to do it, you kind of just decide, I'm in E flat, and this is what it feels like.
And I have a question.
Yes.
Do we need to I guess I don't think we have to, but we are transitioning in between, aren't we?
No.
We don't have to identify.
No, you just simply play the here. This is exactly here. The first beginning of this. Whatever. So you play that, and then they want you to play it in E flat. So then you do that. You know what I mean? And yeah, you play it once, play it in the other key, and you're done. You can play it once in the original key. So there's a handout on that page, and I gave it to the AAGO people, I think 2 weeks ago, which is called Transposition, Not a Four-Letter Word. And the reason I recommend that is because Ken Grinnell has written that, and he goes through about 5 or 6 methods.
I think it was 7.
Was it?
It's a lot.
So you want to find the method that works for you, because not everybody's going to do it the same way. And he gives really great ideas.
If we're in a that's how we recommend singing is use your movable C clefs. Right at 6/3 chords, right at 1/5.
Yeah.
And then when practicing it, 2 things. Say to yourself every 2 bars, up, or down. And also when you've mastered, both step in either direction, immediately practice shifting from transposing up to down.
Oh, interesting.
Because that's you can do the 2 separately, but at least my brain, I get into a mode of transposition, and I have to practice shifting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I use the ear, both, having heard it once and I remember it, and also context. I think it's pretty obvious that this harmony is going here. This you kind of know where, again, because of the style that it's in. It's they're not going to give you something that's really bizarre or modern. Okay, Kathy, very good, very good. I love it.
And just to confirm, we can, in the 30 minutes, we can do our own harmonic analysis on the page.
You can yes.
Put our own bigger bass.
I'm going to check. Yeah, you
I'll
can.
go order on your cell phone.
Yeah.
To take a picture of that.
Okay, great.
Okay.
No big deal.
Let's move on then, because again, we want to keep on schedule here, to the improvisation section, which is on the 2 pages over, maybe? Improvisation, and in here it's A7. So, what I want to say about this, this shouldn't take too long. First thing is you choose A, B, or C, and everybody's going to be better at one than the other, but it's a good idea to practice them all, because when you actually see the test, you might think, oh, I'm really going to be great at making a passacaglia, but then they may give you a melody that you don't like it, or it's awkward and it doesn't make sense, So it's good to have an idea. But I will say for sure the ground bass is the hardest one to do, because it's the strictest. If you're going to do this, it's kind of passacaglia style. So what I did here, and I'll try to demonstrate a little bit of this, but you probably would be fantastic at this. I would assume you would be the passacaglia with your. But so they give you a melody on the page, and here it is. Oh, it sounds like Creator of the Stars at Night.
I want to follow Jesus.
It's a combination of both. Written by Kathleen Thomerson, who, by the way, when I was on the certification committee, she was the chairperson, and she was fantastic.
Oh, wow.
She's fantastic. She's fantastic. So, passacaglia, there's so many ways to do this. If you think you're going to want to do a passacaglia, you have no shortage of examples to draw from. But I think what you want to do for the improv section, this has to do with, in your 3 hours of practice time, set up a memory level devoted to improvisation, and do it in a way, for me or for many of us, we probably make a grade our pistons or whatever, but set up the organ in a way that you're going to know where things are, and where you have combinations. And for the passacaglia, I put this is like straight out of the Jerry Hancock book or something like this, but they ask for 5 or 6 variations. It's not very long, and you need to have an idea. So one, state the melody, and you best to use the feet. I think use the feet. I would use the feet, but you don't have to. Then state it harmonized, Then change the registration, and maybe now you play it, state the melody in the feet and have 2 voices, one in each hand. And then the next one, have a rest on beat 1, and then have 2 chords. And the next one, maybe you have continual motion. Then you have just the hands, move the melody to the soprano, and have a counterpoint in the left hand. In dramatic hymn fashion, so you harmonize each note, and you have any number of options for this. But I think for the grading, this would be treated with the most strictness, because it kind of is in the Baroque form. Compared to like a hymn prelude or a chant prelude, there are so many ways you could possibly choose to do that. So anyway, as an example, so again, I had not prepared this, but just here. So example 1. This bench. This is the most difficult note to harmonize, is that E at the end, because what's going to happen, you're going to end up with parallel. So there's it almost has to be a 2/6 chord. That's almost the only chord you can get away with, because otherwise you're going to. So that's when I say this is the strictest form. It's because you've got these voice leading things, and you want to try to. So that immediately is a red flag, because stepwise motion is always going to introduce a parallel. When you want to avoid parallel, there's any number of things you can do, but the 2 tricks are, of course, use a first inversion chord or contrary motion. Those are the two ways to get out. So we have the first. So there's our state, our first. That's your little red flag. Now we'll harmonize it. So let's see. one example, what did I say next? Two voices, one in each hand, so, maybe you do... something like that, and then try doing it with a rest on beat 1, so you maybe... For this, just have a little toolkit of possible things that you can do, and you can have them in your head, and you can even write it down. And I already did 4 variations right there, and you only have to do 4 or 5 variations. So it's not too bad, but I just say if you choose that one, remember with the grading, they're going to be looking for more things like voice leading and parallels and things. It's the strictest of those forms. For the hymn tune, prelude. Again, I put a few suggestions down, and a lot of them are the same for the hymn and the chant. They're the same general parameters. First of all, what is a hymn tune prelude? It could be any kind of thing. It could be in the Buxtehude style, where Buxtehude will state one voice and then bring in, use the head motive of a hymn, like the first 4 notes or something, and one voice, and then bring it in, and then it's 2 voices, and then the melody comes in like on a solo stop or something, and it has a mordant, one mordant, and then, whatever. But that you could do something like that. You could do a pachelbel like the chorale motet, something that just uses but you could use any model. You can use like Mark played this Healy Willen partita, and that'd be way too long. But you've got so many models for what a hymn tune could be. Think of Rosa Medra by Vaughan Williams, the little pieces by Parry, or the Lutheran models, Paul Mons and Anton Heiler. These are all just ideas of people who wrote these things. But the main points are plagiarize these things. Just have a model in your head of what you want. It's legal plagiarization. So if you would like to do something in a Baroque style, or a Romantic style, or a modern style, that's it. What do I see here? Make sure you use the tune. This is a funny thing. It seems obvious, doesn't it? But you would be on the left side. You would be amazed. It's just everything is too tall for me. You would be amazed how many people will make a prelude and they don't even use the tune. And they start because they get lost in this improvisation idea, and they sort of start, and then they just keep going, and then by the time like 3 minutes have gone by, and then the tune, and then it's too late, and then you're in it. So make sure you use the tune. It's just avoid the constant pedal point. I always tell people one thing you can do: just move your feet. I mean, even if it's a passing note, or just move the feet, because it's so boring when you just have a pedal point and we all suggest and I have here avoid stagnation, sense of urgency. What I mean by that is this is supposed to be brief, and so I mean it's 2 minutes. You're talking 2 minutes. It's the shortest William Harris prelude in G major kind of thing, but with the tune. Okay, so and then same thing with the chant. The same comments there, but the chant. You choose which one is it. Many of your same comments as above. French classical forms, that's acceptable for a chant. You could do one of those plagios with the melody and the pedal on the trumpet. You could do that. You can use a German Baroque idiom. Look at what the third Ave Maristella in the 15 pieces by Dupré, and he writes it's a romantic version of an ornamented chorale by Bach. But that's another idea. And Lenglet does these chant things so well. I don't know if you know I play this a lot, the little Salve Regina, paraphrase on Salve Regina. State the melody and then adorn it with a few chords. And then, you know what I mean? This goes by very, very fast. Or Gerald Lear, I love that little St. Augustine's organ book. These are all models of what those things can be. So just, you probably already from this conversation, you probably have an idea. Think, I'd be better at A, I'd be better at B, or I'd be better at C. And so just kind of have that in mind. Look at some models and go from there. Am I over the time, or should I keep going?
You shouldn't keep moving along.
Okay.
It's 5:30.
All right. Figured bass. Now, the figured bass in here is not difficult. A4, it's one page back. I guess, I don't know how many people do figured bass regularly. We do it occasionally. You probably do it more than anybody with your Bach, with your Bach series. So this probably looks really simple to you. They're not always as simple as this, but again, they're not going to be really. It's not going to be a Bach cantata. They'll put a 7. They'll put some sharps in. It's not meant to be impossible. And I just put some general guidelines right here to stay within the key. Again, this is obvious to most of us. Any note void of a figure is simply a 5/3 root position chord. But as I say, in the key. For example, in this particular piece, the 3rd bar is an E natural, and obviously we know that's a root position E minor harmony. But of course, if the key was A major, then it would be an E major chord. But so it's within the key. Within the key. That's a common mistake that people make. Identify the note. Identify your notes from the written note up. So if it's 5/3, then that's a 5th and a 3rd above the written note. And people often confuse 5/3. I don't know. You should, I think about it as a stack from the bottom up. Then trying to identify every bass note as a like, oh, this is an E minor chord, because that just makes stay close to where you started. Try to stay within an octave. You don't want to have suddenly. Sometimes you could probably give even better advice on this than I have here. Let me just see if my other important points are. Left hand is going to play the written notes only. That's another problem I had with a lot of students. The left hand plays just the bass, and the right hand plays the harmony. But that's hard to get used to because we're used to playing with both hands, And it's usually 3 notes, but it could be 2, especially if you have like a first inversion chord. You may choose to just have 2 notes instead of 3 because you don't want to double your 3rd and things like that. Oh, and this is important for strategy. Don't go too fast, and just keep going. Once you start, just keep going. You have a goal of getting 50%. You'll all get way more than 50%, but keep going, because the worst thing is to stop and crash. And so do you want to say anything about figured bass, Andrew? Because I think if everybody in this room, you're pretty much the expert.
I always like to practice using things that are really hard. So when you come back to doing something simpler, it seems like a breeze. So you're not intimidated by it.
Yeah, and it is intimidating when you see a really weird figure on a. Yeah. So do you have any? What do you do when you see a really difficult figure that just is? I mean, do you kind of try to imply it based on what came before it and came after it, or do you try to count up from the bass note?
It's more. I don't think there's enough time to do that kind of calculation. It's got to be a little bit more intuitive, I think.
Or do you see the note on the page and say, I better throw in a 3, a 3rd?
Yeah.
This
is going to be a dumb question, but we have this in the room with us.
Yes.
Correct, right?
Yep. I know it.
It's not literally in sight.
It's not literally in sight. Exactly.
This is during the 30 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, this whole, what we've been talking about is all that.
This is all the keyboard skill part. Yes, exactly. There's a great book by David Ledbetter. I don't know if any of you have it. It's called Continual Playing According to Handel. It's published by Oxford. I think it's a great book for 2 reasons, because it goes through each figure progressively, and it explains exactly what you need to do, and it gives examples, and then in the back it has all of the examples realized, and so you can consult that if you're in a. It's called Continual Playing According to Handel.
Oh, you can get that online.
Oh yeah. It's available. It's by David Ledbetter. Published by Oxford. It has a purple cover. It's a great book. It's a great book.
I think that the real question is, what do you personally need to do in that room yourself to prepare this example and the example?
Exactly right. And in those 30 minutes, you're going to look at everything, but I may need to spend 20 of those minutes on the transposition, but I may not need to spend any of it on the improv, or so it's you have to budget your.
That's a good global point.
Yeah, you just budget your time, and if you know what you're good at, then you think, okay, that I can manage. It may not be perfect, but I can manage it. So those are all the keyboards things except for the
But
citing.
we also have our
Yeah.
rep. So can you
Yeah.
talk through the actual day of the exam? What's the
Yes.
timing like
Yes.
for rep and the keyboard exam?
Typically on the day of the test, and some people may opt to just take half the test, which is if you take half the test, it would either be just the playing, which is the repertoire and all these keyboard skills, or you could take just the paperwork. But it's better to just take the whole test because, one, it costs you less, because you do it all at once. Also, if you take one half, you can do the other half within 5 years. And so you have 5 years to do the rest. If it's too stressful to only to take the whole test, because June's still busy, then you can take half, and then within 5 years you can take it. But typically, it's one morning would be most of the playing, and then the afternoon would be the first part of the written, and on the second day it's just part 2 of the written test. So, and we'll get to the written now. Part 1 is fugue and analysis, and then part 2 is composition, the oral perception, which I want to demonstrate, and the ear test.
Right, but the actual playing portion of the exam, do you come in and do your rep, and then you go off into a room for 30 minutes, and then you come back and do this? Or does this? do you
No,
walk in
I think you have the
first?
30 minutes, and then you do everything at once.
And
Everything at
is there a
once.
specific order?
No, actually, that's one of the beautiful things. The candidate can choose what order they want to do it in. Yes. So if you would rather do the repertoire first, that's fine. If you rather do the keyboards, and I think it even says you can do the keyboard skills in any order. I put this. I'm getting a new pair of glasses that they're on order, so I can hardly even read my. But it says right here. I copied this right out of the thing. Candidate may choose to begin the exam with organ repertoire or keyboard skills. So you have that. Yep. So you can do them in any order that you. If I were you, I'd rather do the keyboard skills and just get that out of the way, and then play the repertoire. But that's a personal choice. Are there any questions on the keyboard skills part before we go on to the written material? Okay. All right. Great. So let's just keep going. And I think the thing we're going to want to spend the most time on is the fugue, but. So paperwork. So there are 2 sections to the paperwork. Each section is 3 hours. And so you have in the first section fugue and analysis, and I'm not going over the analysis because it would just take forever. But it is there, and there's the solutions for that. And they're going to give you, the analysis is going to be something from the late classical or the romantic. It always is. It's always late classical or romantic. So you know that, and they ask you specific questions. And I didn't give you, but it's on the, I did by email via Kathy, the solutions. And so you've got at least 10 years of exams with solutions uploaded on that website, so that you just have to go back and study that. And so that's enough said about it, analysis. The paperwork is done, and it's sent off to national headquarters and is graded at headquarters. So section 1, analysis and fugue. Section 2, ear test, oral perception, and composition. Let's talk about composition. Just a few. This again is fairly arbitrary. The composition exam is a few pages in, and they're going to give you. This is all done at a desk, by the way. There's no keyboard. It's all just at a desk or at a table. So this is what I'd say to get through the, oh, come on. Really is a lot to this test. Composition, okay. A12. So they start you off with an example, and they've given you this here. The first thing is very important. Read the instructions and take note of what the question is asking. That's one of the. I mean, that seems obvious, but it's actually the most important thing, so that you do what's being asked. This, again, like the rest of the test, it doesn't need to be too long. And remember, I saw this when I was grading these exams. A lot of people did. For example, one of the things is, you don't need to copy out this whatever's written, given to you on the test. I've seen a lot of people they've wasted so much time copying out these. You have 3 hours. It's to do it's reasonable, but just don't waste time doing things like copying that out. You don't need it. Examine the written excerpt. So let's just do this. Let me just read this if I can see it. The directions. So they say continue and bring to a conclusion in approximately 16 measures. So that's not terribly long. The following passage for organ. The resulting composition should be idiomatic for the organ and remain complementary in style. The candidate must demonstrate a solid command of the tools of composition. Now that's one of the vaguest statements that I've seen, but I can elaborate on it a little bit. Including proper voice leading, consistent and stylistically appropriate harmonic language, idiomatic writing for the instrument, and proper use of motivic development. But again, you only have 16 measures here, so it's going to be fairly limited. Continuous writing in a specific number of parts is not required. That's one of the most important lines in that set of directions. That means that this one is, as well as you can see it, but you don't have to, if it's written in 4 parts, that doesn't mean you have to stay in 4 parts. That is not required. You do not need to copy the given measures on the answer sheet. So my tips for this, because again, it's at a desk. So everything you're doing here, you're doing with your internal hearing and by looking at the example. So the first thing you want to do, if you have a preacher who has a little verse of scripture. When I worked for the Presbyterian Church in Pittsburgh, and you came and played there, it was funny. That was considered a Bible-based church. They proclaimed that they were, everything was based on scripture. What was so funny, and I wasn't used to this, but the preacher would select like one line of scripture, and it may be short, and that would be the only scripture that was heard in the whole Sunday. But then they would take that line of scripture and they would pull it apart and examine every word of that scripture. And that was kind of the preaching style there. Whereas I'm used to hearing 3 or 4 long passages of scripture and then somehow the preacher would sing. But it was a totally different thing. But the point of that is that's basically what you're going to do with this written example. They give you a very small example and you're going to look at it and pull apart whatever you can get out of it. So examine the written excerpt and pull it apart to get everything out of it like a preacher would pull apart a scripture verse. What is on the page that we want to steal and incorporate? Build upon the header. This is the header, what's written here. But you don't feel that you're bound by it too, because sometimes if you're totally bound by just repeating and making it the same, it could end up being boring. This is important, and this is another strategic thing. When you do get your final example, write neatly and cleanly, because remember, somebody in an office at the headquarters is going to be grading it, and if they can't read the handwriting or there's ambiguity, that could affect the grading. So that's one thing that's important. Ambiguity will annoy the examiners because they think, well, we want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but that really looks like an awkward 7th or something. So proofread your final version. So this is it. How are you going to flesh this out? Everybody's going to do it differently, but some of those tools these are what they say, imaginative use of the tools of composition. So imitation is one way. Transposition, maybe you take this and you move it into a relative key, or you move it into the minor key and you keep that going. Repetition, but not without purpose, not just to take up space. I can tell you for a fact, the examiners are not sitting there thinking, we said do 16 measures and they only did 14. They're not looking for that. They're looking for something that shows, some creativity, and it shouldn't be too boring, but they're also not looking, for it to be Elliott Carter or something, you only have 3 hours and you only have 16 measures. So you just use what's here and try to be creative. Reduce or expand the number of voices. That's fine. You can add new material. You don't, so that's why I say, build on what's here, but you're not necessarily bound by that. Now, what are the examiners looking for? What are the graders looking for here? Definitely looking for the obvious voice leading issues. And again, if you go to the additional certification resources page, there's a great webinar on this topic, and Vince Carr, I think I think Vince Carr is the one who does it, and he's fantastic, and he pulls up several examples. People submitted examples, and he goes through them from the grading perspective, and he actually has them up on the screen. It's way better than I can do here with my limited technical abilities, which are all Kathy's technical abilities.
But don't call them limited.
No, maybe. So it's fantastic. He'll really give you an example of the perspective that you. So they're looking for the obvious things: parallel fifths, harmonic retrogressions, unprepared or unresolved dissonances, things that just don't make sense, weird register changes with no kind of logical purpose to that. These obvious things. Odd, unexpected or unbalanced register changes. You have inconsistent or strange spacing of harmony. If you're going from a 4-part texture and then all of a sudden you separate your voices by you have the bass all the way down here and the soprano. Well, what's the purpose of that? If it's demonstrated as an effect, that may be one thing. Smooth transition between key centers. So if you decide to make a modulation, how does it end? Do you make a convincing ending? Is it too long or too short? What does this say? They are not they're not counting. I already said that. And they know you have limited time. Watch video on certain. I cannot recommend that highly enough. If you watch that video, Louise has a question.
Yeah, there was one suggestion that I thought was really good, that don't use computer-generated, don't write on your computer, right? Make sure you write on score paper.
When you practice,
When you practice.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because he said, I can tell when someone is cut and pasted, which you can do, obviously.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was.
Well, you'll have to do it by hand, and I recommend, they give you plenty of scratch paper, and you work out your ideas, but then when you're ready, write out your composition. And it's fun, don't start it and then erase everything and make again, because it just makes for a messy score. There's a lot of freedom in this, obviously, and again, I think there's also a lot of it's kind of arbitrary when it comes to the grading, but the examiners are not looking to say, well, I didn't like the style that was provided. I think there's a lot of discretion, but they want to, for people to pass the exam. They're not looking to catch you out on something. So just read the directions very carefully and try to answer the question. Okay, so I need to move on to the next
Just
thing.
one quick
Yes,
question.
yeah.
The 16 measures, does that include the 8 that are given, or do we have to do 16 original ones?
Well, approximately. So let's read this very carefully. Let's see. Continue and bring to a conclusion in approximately 16 measures. So I'd say they're giving you around 16 of your own material. Yeah, because right here it's how many is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 8. Yeah. So I'd say. So this is like 1/3 of the product, and you supply, again, approximately. Nobody's going to count and say, this was 17 and a half measures. Okay, let's go on to the one that makes people the most nervous, which is the fugue. So, where is the fugue example here? There are also very good videos about the fugue. Where is the fugue in here? Why can I not see the fugue? Does anybody see the fugue and I'm missing? Oh, okay. Okay, no, I'm sorry. Here we go. All right. Okay, so how many people are comfortable with fugue writing? We all are comfortable with fugue playing. But I think I've learned most of what I did in preparing for these exams, and I brought here, but I also sent it via email via Kathy, excerpts from this book, which is called The Fugue by Alan Hobbs, which is prefaced by Marie Claire Lan. And it's a wonderful book, and I have a couple copies of which I can pass around. But I sent this, I went through this afternoon and scanned and emailed, just pass these around if you wish. Is that too? I have one. You have yours. So I'll maybe send one over here and send one back there. These are some lessons in each of the aspects of the fugue, but concentrating on the ones that are tested on the exam. So let's look at see what I said here about the fugue. What did I say here? Okay, here's what the question is going to ask you. And I underlined on the handout the important words. Compose a fugal exposition in 4 voices using the subject given below. A recurring countersubject in invertible counterpoint is required. The exposition concludes when the subject has appeared in all 4 voices. The writing should demonstrate knowledge of the counterpoint style of the Baroque period. So they're looking at 18th century counterpoint rules, basically, to say that. So the first thing I'd say is any fugue subject is like a dog. And that seems funny, but it's exactly like a dog. It has a head, a body, and a tail. Depending on what type of dog you have, that may vary. But when you're writing a fugue, it's the head and the tail that really matters. The body is just there, The reason I say that is because the first thing that you will have to attack is writing your answer, and you have to decide whether it's a real answer or a tonal answer. And I meant to bring my volume 5 Baron writer with all those fugues. It's amazing. Just open up that volume 5, which is the first all the big preludes and fugues of Bach, and go through each fugue and look at how he starts them. And of course, you'll see that, with few exceptions, almost all the fugues violate all the rules. But that's because he was the master of all the rules. But if you look at, like, the one that I recently played a lot is the one in A major. That is a textbook fugue from beginning to end. It is so amazing. That's a great fugue to look at. Also, the one in C major, BWV 545, just to get us in. But you have to decide on a real and tonal answer, and we'll talk about this in a moment. So these are the things that you want to do. You look at your subject, taking note of the head and the tail, first of all. The answer, obviously, is transposed to the dominant key. It's always in the dominant key. That's not optional. If it's a real answer, you just transpose it to the dominant key, and then you're in terms of writing the answer, then you're done. But if it needs a tonal answer, and there are 2 ways to know that, then you have to make alterations to the subject at the beginning or the end in order to keep it from going too far out of the original key. And that's really the reason why you have to alter elements of the dominant. Otherwise, you end up circling through too many keys. So how to know if you need a tonal answer? The first thing is, you look at the head of the subject. If there are elements of the dominant in the head of the subject, then you have to have a tonal answer. Now, this is very funny. If you play that subject, of course, I would consider that elements of the dominant. You get a very strong dominant, and yet what does Bach do? He gives a real answer and not a tonal answer. So that's a perfect example. But if there are elements of the dominant, what does that mean? Is that maybe if the subject starts on the dominant note of the key, or if the dominant note is in the first few, the head of the subject is like the fewest possible notes that you have to play to recognize the subject. So, like, for example, looking at Bach fugues, if you had, well, of course, that's the head of the subject. You know exactly what it was. Or if it's, that's probably the head of the subject. You know exactly. Or if it's, that's the head of the subject. As soon as you know what the subject is, that's the head of the subject. So that gives you an idea. The body generally remains unchanged. Okay, and then if the fugue subject has a modulation at the end, then you need a tonal answer. So that's the way to know. The contour, when you're writing your answer, the contour is going to be the same. So looking at the example here, we can definitely see that it has elements of the dominant. So right away, so probably your answer is going to end up starting probably with a perfect fourth instead. You have to alter that, otherwise you're getting too far from the original. I can't do that because it's a perfect fourth. But of course, I'm not improvising it, I'm writing it down on a piece of paper. But that's going to need a tonal answer for sure. Now, the counter subject. This is a difficult thing because you need it to work with the answer and also with the subject. So what you do here, it's like it's like baking a cake. So you take your subject, and that's just, then you look and you determine your answer, real or tonal, and then you write down your answer. Then you go back to the subject, and you have to compose a new counter subject. That's free material. The counter subject, you have to invent it. The counter subject is a foil to the subject. So, for example, if your subject has a lot of slow notes, right, then your counter subject is going to want to play off that with contrasting rhythm and contrasting intervals. So you do something that's the opposite. If you have a very busy subject, then your counter subject is probably going to be more slow and more neutral. You should write the counter subject under the subject. So you can, on your scratch paper, you write down your subject, you write down your answer, then write down your subject again, and then either above or below compose a counter subject. And they say invertible counterpoint. I'll talk about that in just a second. Although we probably don't have time for this, but there's an extremely good explanation of that from Ava Z, talking about exactly what the invertible counterpoint means. But then you start piecing it together. So you write your subject, and then you write your, and by the way, so it's just that you write your counter subject with the subject. Then you have to transpose your counter subject to the dominant key so that it works with the answer as well. So that's you kind of like put these almost like with paper and scissors, and you start to put them together. Subject, and then answer with counter subject, and then you may need a little transitional material, and then the subject comes in again. And when the subject comes in, the counter subject is there above that. And you only need 4 voices, so this doesn't take very long. By the time each voice enters, it's like about 8 measures or so, and then your example is finished. So counter complements is yes. The other thing about the subject, so when you write your subject down, the other thing you want to do is analyze it. Every melody like this, it has an implied harmony, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know. There's no harmony written here, but there is implied harmony, right? So the implied harmony is like kind of the most basic, most obvious harmony that would be underneath that. So it might be like, obviously the first is it's G major. And it is really as basic as that. It's supposed to just give you a very bare bones parameter to then work with when you write your counter subject. So if I was inventing a counter subject, I would want to stay. You have to kind of stay fairly neutral because your counter subject has to be able to work in the different voices. So let's see here. So a counter subject is going to be, let's see if it was underneath. So I'm going to do something that's a little opposite of that. So I'm doing something that when the melody is busy, the counter subject is not busy, and when the counter subject is it's and the opposite. Okay. Analyze. I said that. Write your answer. Write your counter subject, and you put it all together with the voices one by one. Okay. Good. Most fugues. Most fugues begin in the alto or the tenor. If you almost never see a fugue that starts in the bass. And maybe sometimes you have, one in the, actually, again, I come back to the, This one starts in the soprano, doesn't it? Am I right? That's the soprano voice in that fugue? But usually it's alto or tenor, so that's you build your voices outwards. You can have a short bridge. Look at the Alan Hobbs material just for a moment, just so you know what's there. This is so good. This book is almost impossible to find. It's out of print, and it's from this obscure man in Canada who publishes it out of his house and things. And there are other fugue resources, but I put there basically what you need to, according to the AAGO exam. But I especially want to point out the page that says melodic numbering. I'm not exactly sure what page that's going to be on, but it's composing your first fugues is the best way I have found to write your answer. The tonal fugue. Okay. It's right after the tonal fugue, and there's this section on melodic numbering.
Do you have a page? Oh, they are page. Absolutely.
No, but it is paragraph 44. I can tell you that. Melodic numbering. This is you got it. This is fantastic. Basically, this deals with the issue of the head of the subject and the tail of the subject. So what you do is you write down your subject, and you can do this in your preparation in the test. Write down the subject and draw 2 lines underneath exactly as here, and you simply write the scale degrees down on the first line, and then you transpose them, because when you have a tonal answer, whatever was tonic becomes dominant, and whatever is dominant becomes tonic. And there's a good example of this. So looking at the melodic numbering, as you can see, C major, and the scale degrees are 1, 5, 6, 5, 4, etc. Right? And so when you write your answer, you see where I put the brackets there at the head of the subject and the tail. The body in the middle, you just leave it alone. That's an exact transposition. So in this case, if you wrote in the beginning that it was 1, 5, in the answer it's as simple as 5, 1. So the answer is 5, 1. So the subject here is. And then the answer would be 5, 1. And so it just, and the middle part remains exactly as written, and then the end is changed as well. So in this case, let's see, it's 5. I guess that would be considered 7. And so that's how you get your answer. So here's the answer. Oh, he says etc. Da da da. Well, you just get the answer. Da 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 D. D. And it brings you back to the tonic. So that would be your tonal answer. Whatever was tonic becomes dominant. Whatever becomes dominant is tonic. Great. Okay. And then the middle stays the same. So there you have your answer. This book is so great, and if you find yourself needing additional material, I can always scan things for you. In fact, I'll pass around this book so that you can see what else is there.
You started with the parts of the fugue.
Yes, I gave you what I thought were the most relevant things. But there's a lot in here. But there's a lot more than the exam is asking you to do. So that's the other thing, not to do more than that. What do we have? Okay. I know that it's a huge topic. We could spend all night on that, but I do want you to hear the oral perception part of the test. This is totally brand new, and the simplest thing is for me to play it for you. If you turn to the section in the handout, which is A11, and this is a fully authorized AAGO digital speaker, which they sent to us when we had the FAGO exams last year. So what I want to do simply is to play this for you, and you'll know exactly what's going to happen on this. This is easy. This is very easy. Once you hear this, you understand. So let me just see. What did I do with this? As soon as I can find it, I will. These are the actual ones from. Oh, here we go. All right. I should be connected to this. Oh, this is the ear test. I don't need that. I want the, oh. I hope I didn't. A10. That's not what I wanted. This is, well, let me, listen to this.
Here begins the ear test for the Associateship Examination
That's
of the
the ear
American
test.
Guild of Organists.
This is so you know.
There
This
are
is what
two
it's going to be
tests.
like.
Test A and Test B. Each test will be played 4 times
And then you
with
hear
a
it on here.
45-second interval following each hearing. You may write out on the sheet at any point after it has been placed in front of you. After the 4th performance of the test, you will be allowed no more than 5 minutes to complete your writing. Your answer sheet has been fully prepared to accommodate your written answer.
So they
must
give you
use
the first couple of
provided
notes
answer
and the
sheet.
key and everything.
It contains the exact number of measures for each test, as well as helpful
This is
material
actually
such as
A10.
metronome markings, time signatures, key signatures, and cue notes. Test B. The key for Test B is A minor, and the time signature is 4/4.
That's pretty
The starting
obvious.
pitches are given on your answer sheet. Here is the tonic chord.
And then they will play this 4 times, giving you time to. This is a 2-part dictation. Oh, this is pretty long. And etc. And they're gonna do that. This is actually not what I was looking for. I was looking for the oral perception, which I really hope I have here. So let me just check this. I hope I did not lose that. Here we go. Ah, I got it. Here we go. Okay, this is what. So this is an example.
Oops.
So they're going to ask you these questions. It says pre-1750. So everything that's listed under A11 refers to this recorded example. And this material is a sketch of what's heard that you use to just kind of answer the question. So this is basically the rhythm. And I think they play this 4 times as well. So what you just heard is the oral example for questions pre-1750 A, B, C, D, E, as well as referring to that chart and on the next page. Does that make sense? it's actually really quite simple. And then there's a second one, post 1950, which again, they have the same kind of thing, but to give you an example of what to expect, here is that one. This is A11, post 1750. It's not much after 1750, is it? I think you get the idea. So there'd be two examples, one pre-1750, one post, and they'll play that 4 times, and you consider what you're hearing and use that sheet to answer the question. So it's quite straightforward. So we are not covering the repertoire, the hymn playing, sight reading, analysis, ear training. But I hope that the main thing is that to have a comprehensive idea of what's on the test. And to not be intimidated by it, because I think actually given one strategy, preparation, and the scoring parameters, I think very doable to pass the test. And the goal of taking any of this test is just if there's one thing that you get to explore or do better or just learn the new repertoire or whatever it is, there's something that will make anybody better by doing it. And nobody here sitting in this room needs to take any of these exams because you're all extremely accomplished. But I'm so pleased that so many are considering it because it sets a great example. Goodbye. Thank you for listening. And please contact me with any questions.